Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Gavin Ryan. Today, we commemorate the centenary of the start of the Third Battle of Ypres. After mid-1917, following mutinies in the overstrained French army, British forces assumed an even greater role in the war on the Western Front. Attacking from Ypres in Belgium, the British Commander-in-Chief, Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig, sought to break out of the so-called Ypres salient and reclaim the Belgian coastline from the German army. Following the success at Messines in June, which removed the Germans from the British southern flank, the offensive began in earnest on the 31st of July 1917. Australian forces were brought into the offensive on the 20th September, where they took part in an attack along Menin Road, attacking on a narrow front, supported by immense amounts of firepower. The battle was a great success. Further successful advances followed at Polygon Wood on the 22nd of September and Brudsenda on the 4th of October. The fighting went on in appalling weather and with crippling losses. The Australians took part in unsuccessful attacks on Polycapel on the 9th of October and Passchendaele on the 12th of October. In just over a week, there were almost 11,000 Australian casualties. Finally, with the British Army stuck in the low-lying muddy fields, churned up by months of artillery fire, the bloody offensive came to an untidy end in November. Many would afterwards refer to this offensive, actually a series of battles, by the name of the village that had become the last objective, Passchendaele. All 5 Australian divisions took part in the Third Battle of Ypres. In 8 weeks of fighting, they had incurred over 38,000 casualties. No breakthrough was achieved. The costly offensives ended up with the capture of Passchendaele village after the Australians had been relieved by the Canadian Corps, widened the Ypres salient by a few kilometres. Official historian Charles Bean later reflected on the carnage, writing, "I have often thought that many a youngster, when he was hit out there on the Passchendaele heights, and he knew that the end had come, must have thought to himself, well, at least they'll remember me in Australia." Today we remember the Third Battle of Ypres. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. We warmly welcome the family of Corporal Theodore Wright, whose story will be told shortly. We're honoured to acknowledge Mr John King, President, ACT State Branch of the Returned and Services League of Australia. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Barker College, Junior School, Watara. From Queensland, St Agatha's Primary School, Clayfield. Townsville Central State School, North Ward. And Mater Dei Primary School from Ashgrove. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. Could I ask you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
At a full party, I turn. At a full party, present. Arms.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Theodore Willard Wright. Theodore Wright was born on the 30th of December 1892 to Joseph and Alice Wright of Mount Gambier, South Australia. He attended the local public school and Mrs. Carozzi's grammar school and worked as a compositor for the South Eastern Star. After his parents moved to Adelaide, Theodore took a job in Petersburg working for the Times. But after 2 years, he returned to Mount Gambier, where he was living when war broke out in 1914. Wright tried a number of times to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force, but was turned down because of bad teeth. He saved up and bought an expensive set of false teeth in order to pass the medical, but lost 2 sets as the result of being so fond of swimming. He finally kept a set of teeth long enough to be accepted for service in February 1916 and was posted to the 43rd Battalion. He was engaged to marry Miss J.M. Opie, but chose to delay the wedding until he returned to Australia. Wright proved an able soldier and was promoted to Lance Corporal within 4 months of enlisting. He left Australia for active service overseas, sailing from the outer harbour in Adelaide on the 9th of June 1916 and arriving in Marseille in late July. In late November 1916, Wright received his final promotion to corporal whilst training in England. Wright was a machine gunner of the 43rd Battalion and in May 1917 attended a Lewis gun school to further his training. He rejoined the battalion in June of that year. Shortly afterwards, he wrote a letter home to be sent in the case of his death, which read, "I have never regretted joining up, and I can truthfully say that I have enjoyed the life of a soldier. I have tried to play the game of life straight and clean and believe that I have succeeded. Don't mourn for me. I shall be happy to give my life for the cause should the necessity arise. Lovingly yours, Theo." In June, the battalion took part in the Battle of Messines. The initial assault was preceded by the detonation of 19 mines under the German front line, causing an estimated 10,000 German casualties. Infantry then advanced behind a carefully coordinated artillery bombardment and then took their objectives within the first hours of the battle. Success at Messines was paved by the way of the Third Battle of Ypres, which began in earnest on the 31st of July 1917 with the British attack at Pleckham Ridge. At this time, the 43rd Battalion was in the front line near the Belgian town of Warnerton, whilst Corporal Wright was in a trench with a machine gun party. A shell dropped nearby. He was badly wounded in the blast and died a short time later. His boss from Mount Gambier was not far away when Wright was killed, later reporting that Wright was the best mate you could want to have. He was a very good man in every way. Theodore Wright was 24 years old. It was reported that he was buried near where he fell, but his body was not recovered after the war. Today, his name appears on the Menin Gate Memorial to the missing at Ypres, alongside the names of 6,000 Australians with no known grave. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right, amongst more than 60,000 Australians who died during the First World War. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal Theodore Willard Wright, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms and for the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we shall remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party, shoulder, arms. Catapult party, outwards, men. Catapult party, quick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.